Once upon a time, in the wide, dry lands between the Senegal River and the Sahara Desert, people lived under the hot sun and the blowing sands. Caravans crossed those lands, carrying salt from the desert and gold from the forests far in the south. The people who controlled the wells and the routes controlled the wealth. Among the peoples of this region were two important groups who lived close but did not share equal power. There were the Hassān nobles, descendants of warriors who led the tribes, settled disputes, controlled trade routes, and collected taxes from those who lived under their authority. And there were the Zawāya scholars who devoted their lives to the Quran, teaching and religious guidance. They prayed, studied, and taught children and adults. They respected peace and knowledge more than weapons. Over many years, the Hassān nobles demanded more tribute from the Zawāya. The burden grew heavy. The scholars were made to pay, even though they were the teachers of religion and the moral guides of society. In the year 1644, a time when no one had ever heard of electricity, or railways, or even printed newspapers in that region, a new voice rose among the Zawāya. His name was Nasir al-Din. He was known not for his sword, but for his wisdom. He had studied Islamic law and ethics. People respected him for his fairness, his good character, and his courage to speak truth. He believed the land needed justice. He believed that it was not right for religious teachers and poor people to be crushed by tribute. He dreamed of a society governed by fair rules and by religious law that protected people from oppression. As his influence spread, many Zawāya clans and students began to gather around him. They hoped that through him, justice would return. He spoke not with threats, but with arguments. However, once his movement grew, the Hassān nobles understood that a challenge had been born. One side wanted to protect old authority. The other side wanted to reform it. The struggle did not explode in one day. It moved slowly, like the wind that carves the shape of dunes. In some valleys and oases, the followers of Nasir al-Din refused to pay tribute. In others, they tried to persuade whole communities to follow a new order. They even reached communities near the Senegal River and encouraged rulers to stop selling fellow Muslims into slavery, which was rare and bold for that era. These acts made the movement not only social but moral. As the years passed, between 1644 and the early 1670s, control of some areas shifted. Sometimes the Zawāya succeeded in taking charge of certain routes and villages without major battles. Sometimes the Hassān nobles came back with force and re-established rule. For 3 decades, the region felt tension like a rope pulled from both ends. It was not a war of constant fighting, but a war of pressure, refusal, influence, and occasional confrontations. It was also a war of ideas, and ideas can be stronger than swords. Nasir al-Din's influence extended beyond his immediate circle. He tried to set a new moral standard in the lands near the Senegal River. He believed that a ruler who called himself Muslim should act with justice and protect life, not profit from the misery of others. His name became known across tribal lines. Some supported him with conviction. Others feared the loss of old power. Neutral tribes watched carefully to see which force would endure. But every human leader carries a limit. In 1674, after 30 years of efforts, Nasir al-Din died. His death was not only the loss of a man, but the loss of the only figure who held the movement together. When the root is cut, the branches weaken. After his passing, the unity of the Zawāya collapsed. Without a leader as respected and as balanced in mind and morals, they could not stand against the nobles who still held military strength. The Hassān nobles regained control. Tribute returned. social order looked once again as it had before the war began. The Zawāya withdrew mainly to their religious roles, teaching, writing, copying manuscripts, and guiding children and adults in faith. On the surface, it looked as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. Not on the land, but in the minds of people. The memory of Nasir al-Din remained. The idea that scholars and moral teachers could challenge rulers did not die. The belief that authority should answer to justice did not disappear. Later religious reformers in West Africa, in places like Futa Toro and Futa Jalon, would remember that a scholar once rose in the desert and tried to make law serve justice instead of power. The Char Bouba War became a seed in history. Some seeds do not bloom at once, but they stay in the soil of memory until the time is right. So even though the Zawāya did not win in the visible way that the world counts victory, the war reshaped thinking. People learned that authority could be questioned. They learned that religion could stand against oppression. They learned that even without swords, a voice of justice can move nations. And that is why elders still speak of the long struggle from 1644 to 1674 and call it the Char Bouba War. It was not only a war of land, but a war of principle, a war between the force of tradition and the force of reform. Moral of the story: power can rule bodies, but ideas can rule generations. A man may die, but a cause can outlive him. The end.